Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be rambling on first about a plot hole I noticed in Avengers Endgame, and second going over why I think we should have had like a Black Widow movie before Endgame instead of a Captain Marvel one, and then had a Captain Marvel movie after Endgame. So right off the bat, there's gonna be spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie and you're wary about, who lives, who dies, what happens at the end, this is not a video to watch. It's not a bad movie. I would recommend you see it. If we can get it a higher amount of revenue than Avatar, I'll sleep soundly tonight. But anyways, so on to the discussion. So the plot hole is, do you recall that scene where they were passing like the sort of makeshift Infinity Gauntlet that, well, not really makeshift, but the one that Iron Man made with the Power Stones in it? Went to someone and then was passed to Spider-Man, and he was flying with his web attached to the Mjolnir, or Thor's hammer, and then he crashed and handed it over to Captain Marvel, and what they were trying to do was deliver the Infinity Gauntlet to this sort of makeshift time machine that was used before they made like the actual working one, in an effort to prevent Thanos from getting his hands on it. And so Captain Marvel is flying to this van, and she flies so slow that Thanos is able to, chuck his weird helicopter blade sword like a javelin and destroy the van and prevent them from being able to in turn prevent Thanos from getting the Infinity Gauntlet. And the plot hole is, why didn't she fly at the speed of light? Or at least a lot faster than how she was flying then. In the Captain Marvel movie, it was established that she can fly at the speed of light. The whole point of the film was they were trying to get the Skrull refugees, their ship working or whatever, so it can fly at the speed of light, and they don't have to use oddly a lot more convenient, a lot more sensible gateway thing that already exists to travel vast distances in space. But around the end of the film, the Skrulls fly off and Captain Marvel flies off with them, with the implication that she is at the same speed as this ship flying at the speed of light. And then around the beginning of Endgame, not the very beginning, but pretty close to the beginning, they find the planet that Thanos is staying on after his victory in Infinity War, and Captain Marvel's all like, hold on, I'm going to check to see if there's any armies or defense systems. And so she flies down and is there for a few seconds and then flies back up and says, no, it's just him. And maybe this is my mistake, but I was kind of under the impression that she was checking all over the planet for this stuff, knowing how crafty Thanos is, knowing how he was able to actually succeed and snap away half of the universe's living organisms, that she would be thorough with her checking, and if she's like there for anything longer than a few minutes, she must be traveling at speeds far faster than she was with that Infinity Gauntlet later. So we know she can fly extremely fast, so why is it that at this integral moment, when everything is at stake, when Thanos will snap his fingers and wipe out all life in the universe and create a completely new one, she doesn't utilize the sort of speed we've seen her used before. It's not like she's worried about running into anything. To be able to fly at the speed of light means you'll have to have like really quick reflexes and real good accuracy. Otherwise, when she's flying with those Skrulls, if she's even a few degrees separated from them, turning a little bit too far to the left by, just a fraction of a millimeter, depending on how far they go, she'll end up in a completely different part of the galaxy than the Skrulls, as Muller pointed out in his Unbridled Rage. And so that kind of solves, what if she, crashes into one of her friends or allies? And for her enemy, she can just, crash right through an enemy ship, no problem. There's not really anything physical that can stop her and prevent her from just punching her way through. So even if there's sheer terrain in the way, it shouldn't be a problem. It just came off as very odd. I understand why they did it. It would have been the biggest fucking blunder of the decade if the victory went to Captain Marvel, who is this very new character to the MCU, and it wasn't to Iron Man, who effectively started the MCU. I can understand that, but still plot hole as far as I'm concerned. And it kind of got me thinking, there's not really any event in Endgame that absolutely needed Captain Marvel. Like, saving Tony Stark could have been done by Thor or Guardians of the Galaxy or, any of the sort of spacefaring characters that have already been established. And preventing Thanos from getting that snap with the new Infinity Gauntlet could have been done by the Hulk. It could have been done by any number of characters. It could have even been done by Iron Man, and their skirmish was made even longer. There were two final fights with Thanos. The first between Thanos, Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor, all working together to stop him. And the second between Thanos versus Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, and Captain Marvel. Her role being stopping him from getting the snap and nearly prying the glove off of him. Or gauntlets, by mistake. And the implication there, I find, is that, she's as important of a character as these big three. Iron Man, who started the MCU, Captain America, who sort of made it viable, I would argue, and Thor, who also contributed a huge amount to starting this decade-long cinematic universe experiment, and the first cinematic universe that didn't suck complete ass. I'm sorry, Alien vs. Predator movies, but you were terrible. And some could say, well, listen, Captain Marvel, your movie came out a month before this one. It's literally still out in theaters. Just sit down and wait until you're actually as important as these guys. And they wouldn't necessarily be wrong. I don't think Captain Marvel should have been in Endgame. I think she should have been what launched the next period in Marvel's cinematic universes. Instead, the movie that came before Endgame should have been a Black Widow movie. And I have a few reasons for that. The first reason is Black Widow is an established character. She's been with the Avengers for pretty much the whole run of the Avengers. And she's had her character development, but we never really got to see her background in depth. Considering she dies in Endgame, I think that death would have been that much more impactful if we got to see her background as a Soviet spy, as someone who was experimented on a bunch and, lost her ability to have fertility and whatever. And then, the next movie comes out and she's dead and, remember all that trauma and suffering she went through, we remember what she turned into from that, a hero and member of Earth's mightiest defenders. And it's all the worse that she had to kill herself to stop this madman Thanos after he destroyed half of living things in the universe. And number two, her being a Soviet spy would sort of lend itself to having a sort of different movie than the usual superhero action stuff. It could be a slightly different genre that I think would have served as a nice sort of break from the standard superhero stuff. And then Endgame comes out, and Endgame does not shy away from the sort of action-packed battles that a lot of people go to these movies to see. It would be a sort of calm before the storm. And so then, what of Captain Marvel? I think she should have been introduced after Endgame. It could even be the first Marvel movie after Endgame rather than a Spider-Man sequel, or it could be after Spider-Man. But the thing is, she, from what I've heard, is going to be like the leader of the new Avengers. And if that is the case, then I think it would be good to sort of start from scratch and then rebuild themselves up from there. For anyone who is still super invested in Marvel movies after this, what is clearly very much a sort of finale to an age of Marvel cinematic adventures, or at least how they would perceive it to be, they'd want to know who the new members of the team are. We've seen the torch passed a few times, like Thor making Valkyrie the new leader of the Asgardians. But the actual leader of the Avengers, I think, should have like a, her own introduction. And being after Endgame, they can then introduce his stuff with the Skrulls. They can, harp back to the Kree, and people would be, a little bit familiar with them. And they can start sort of leaving hints and pieces as to a new major threat that they will eventually have to come face to face with and stop. But going into all of this sort of cosmic politics and introducing this new alien race that, if you're familiar with the comics, you would know they've had a really big impact on the Marvel universe. Right before the finale with Thanos just seems to be a bit of a misstep in my opinion. So Captain Marvel is introduced to after Endgame, which I guess would mean that she isn't hinted at in the end of Infinity War. And she gets her own movie. We learn a bit about her powers, we learn more about her characters. There's not that sort of expectation that she needs to fit some sort of role within a later movie, so they might be a lot more free to give her a more interesting story, and hopefully one that makes a lot more sense. There's no conflict as to why didn't Nick Fury call her when aliens were invading the world the first time? Why didn't Nick Fury call her when Ultron was gonna wipe out all life on Earth? Why didn't he call her when Thanos reared his ugly head the first time? That issue no longer is one because she hasn't appeared yet. You can even sort of structure the Captain Marvel movie off of that fact. If you want to start with the premise that she's originally from Earth and she knows about Nick Fury and was friends with him, maybe he didn't have a means to communicate with her and she sort of came down to Earth after the fact, hearing about what happened to Thanos. Or hell, maybe she was snapped. Like, sorry guys, I couldn't be a part of this fight. I was literally dust, but now I'm here and I can help take down any new threats, like, I don't know, Galactus maybe, who is a sort of cosmic scale threat. Though not as big of a threat as Thanos, I would argue, since Thanos is able to eliminate all life in the universe with a single snap rather than eat planets one by one, but you get the point. Inevitably, they are going to have to slow down with the scale of these Marvel movies for a while, because you can't just keep following super epic, everybody's here crossover with super epic, everybody's here crossover. Now that Thanos is dead, we can start focusing on smaller villains, baddies of the week and all of that, and Spider-Man sort of shows that, even with him fighting Mysterio rather than fighting some galaxy-ending Eldritch abomination or something like that. We can start introducing new heroes like the Fantastic Four. We can start introducing new villains like Doctor Doom or the Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus or the Scorpion or whatever. Just bring back some different villains that weren't in the MCU yet, and start up some new stories. And if they're good stories, I think people will keep seeing them. There might be particular favorite characters that they want to see on the big screen. I know I have a few. And that's basically it. Overall, I do think Endgame was a good movie, but this plot hole was just something I can't stop thinking about. And this sort of missed opportunity to have a sort of blank slate, or as blank of a slate as you can get, with the next line of Marvel movies. Also, just a missed opportunity. So I hope you enjoyed the video, that it gave you something to think about and otherwise entertained you. Take care.